and she was about to expose it before she was murdered. Or she was murdered just a few days before she was scheduled to go on a show and expose it. Yeah, yeah. So we talk about all that in the book. But one of the things in it, the tagline at the back, nobody's looking for these kids. And she said that in 2019, the senator did to Kathy Hall, because once the parental rights are terminated, they've cut off all family communication with these kids. So whoever's adopted them, whether they're a wonderful Christian family that everybody loves and they're doing the right thing and their hearts are pure, or it's a pedophile who's adopting all kinds of kids to use for trafficking, you don't know. You don't know, and the family has no contact with that child. They're cut off. They don't have the ability to track down, so they can lose these kids and they go missing. I mean, there's, tens of thousands of missing American kids, not to mention the ones at the border, but missing American children. And nobody knows. And if they've been adopted out to a trafficker, they're not going to tell them that that child's missing. There's no accountability. There's no follow-up.
So Terri LaPoint, I really appreciate you accepting the invitation to come on this podcast. And we met at the State House that day, and I learned a new phrase I did not know existed, medical kidnapping.
Yes.
Who would have thought that was even a thing?
Right.
So first and foremost, if you could explain to the audience, because I have no doubt there's a lot of people that are unaware of that phrase as well,
Right.
and even know that's a thing.
Yeah, and they've probably heard of cases and you probably have heard of cases where it's happened, but just not in that term. It's essentially where Child Protective Services takes a child from their family for a medical kinds of reason, medical disagreement. Maybe it's a complex medical situation that has symptoms that mimic abuse, and so they get accused of abuse that they didn't do. Or maybe it's wanting to get a second medical opinion before they do something major with their child. It can be a lot of things, but it just has to do with somebody being taken from their family that shouldn't be for medical kinds of reasons.
That's absolutely terrible. Can you explain a certain situation that was probably one of the worst that you've seen?
That's always a hard one, because there were times I would feel like, is this a competition to see who's coming up with the worst story? But because I ended up being asked to be an investigative journalist for medicalkidnap.com, a website that was just starting, and so we kind of defined the term. It had been used once, but my biggest story actually happened right here in Alabama. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was where they took a 14-year-old mother's newborn. She was a rape victim, and they took her newborn from the hospital on grounds that they knew at the time were bogus, and they were. So that was horrible. I had 1 million hits overnight on that story. One of the worst I can think of was stories-wise was a little girl who was taken in Arizona over the parents fighting. Somebody got mad and just said, it got mad at one of the parents. It was like a malicious thing, false accusations, and they took the child and then accused the mom of drugs, and which wasn't the case, and it should have been dropped. But what they did was they placed this little girl in a home with a man who already they had suspicions about, and they should have known, they should have seen the signs. But this man is serving a 17-year sentence now for running a pedophile pornographic ring out of his home with the foster kids and kids that he had adopted.
That is terrible.
And the guardian ad litem still on the case. And then when they got the child out of that case, out of that house of horrors, then they put her in a home. They adopted her out, and this woman ended up putting her in a bathtub, scalding hot bathtub, where she ended up with third-degree burns all over her body, over 80% of her body. She survived, but she lost some toes. I mean, out of the frying pan and into the fire.
And this is a girl that you say was medical kidnapped
Well,
from her original parents?
Yeah.
And ended up in this situation, obviously not by her choice.
Right. And I don't know that we would have technically called that a classic medical kidnapping, as far as there's medical situations that arise. And what we found out is medical situations arise in many of these cases. Okay, one of the worst that I've heard about, I met this mom in Washington, D.C. Last year, and her little boy had a spider bite. And then after that, his knee had all this swelling. And when she took him to the emergency room, or took him to the doctor or whatever, they said they thought it was cancer. But her pediatrician said that it could be something an infection from the spider, black brown recluse. And so they needed to do further testing. Well, she wanted to do further testing. They intervened, the state intervened, Child Protective Services, and they took this child, and they didn't do further testing. They subjected him to chemo and radiation, the whole 9 yards, without his parents, without anybody being there with him. He's a 9-year-old kid in the hospital, 9 or 10 at the time, and they ended up cutting off his leg.
Oh, wow.
And they reattached from his just above his ankle, so his foot is reattached, so his ankle joint is now his knee, that they can do prosthetics and stuff. There was no cancer.
There was no cancer
in his leg when they tested it.
And even if there were, I mean, I just can't tell you how much this infuriates me, knowing that there's actually alternative treatments now for cancer also. So even if there was cancer, the parents should have had the choice on what treatments to take.
But parents don't have a choice. In America, you don't. If a child gets a diagnosis of cancer and you don't go through the chemo, radiation, surgery, just like the mainstream wants you to do, then they'll come to your door. They will take that child. That's almost a given. That you really don't have a choice in America. Or just to get a second opinion. I remember one she had gone to Las Vegas escaping some fires in Los Angeles. All the Los Angeles fires in like 2017, 2016, 2018, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And she'd gone to Las Vegas with her little girl, and she had some kind of a swelling on her side. And they said at the emergency room that it was cancer. And she said, and they wanted to take her kidney. And she was like, whoa, hey, before you take my toddler's kidney, can you do a biopsy? Can you do some further testing before you take her kidney? And they took the child away from her. It actually was cancer. All she wanted was a second opinion before they took the organ.
That's so terrible. Would you happen to know what hospital this was?
Well, that one was, she ended up going to UCLA, but they transferred her back to UCLA, so there was Las Vegas. Here's the thing. There are these doctors called child abuse pediatricians, and they are at every children's hospital across America.
I see.
They're everywhere. And in fact, even like UAB has a child abuse pediatrician. So some hospitals that are not children's hospitals, they're there at all of them. And they are federally funded through Health and Human Services, and their job is to determine whether something is abuse or not, which sounds great. I mean, that sounds good in principle.
Sure.
But they're not experts in anything. So radiology or all the different fields of study that it could be there are lots of things that can mimic abuse. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or a brittle bones condition. You know, if you see a story of somebody with multiple broken bones in various, especially healing rib fractures in various stages of healing, that's almost always a medical condition that is not abuse. But it makes great headlines.
Oh, yeah.
And these are usually innocent parents.
And I'm sure, like most people in the medical field, they tend to agree with who's funding them more than anything.
Yes. Texas Policy Foundation found that when the child abuse pediatrician was there, they found abuse in like 88% of the cases. When there wasn't a child abuse pediatrician, when there were actually just, the doctors who were actual experts, it was only like 22%. So it's a dramatic, it's a dramatic number.
That's so terrible.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what can be done to start addressing this problem and making sure things like this doesn't happen anymore?
Okay, so some states, Texas has a bill that they've passed into law that gives parents the right to a second opinion that has to be heard by the court. There are states that are doing some things on the state level. The root of the problem is the federal funding. So we've got the CAPTA 1974, Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, and then we've got ASFA, the Adoption and Safe Families Act 1997, which it gives these are federal funds. That ASFA gives federal funds to states to take children from their homes, place them with strangers in foster care, and adopt them out to strangers. This is millions of federal dollars that states don't get if they keep the family together, or if they reunify, or they find programs. Maybe it was a poverty issue that the child was taken away for. Maybe it's really not any even abuse allegations, because most allegations against parents are not abuse. Neglect can be anything. Very nebulously defined. So they have to take the child, and they can't. If they put them with family members, they don't get that funding. If they adopt them out to family members, they don't get that funding. Just a question: do you have any idea how many? You want to take a guess? How many Alabama kids leave the foster care system because they're adopted by relatives?
I have no idea.
You would think it'd be kind of high of the percentage, because a lot of people are raised by their grandparents or aunts, uncles. I was raised by my grandparents. Less than 1%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Less than 1%.
And it has to do with the federal funding. So we can easily go in there and fix that federal funding structure where it incentivizes keeping families together when possible, providing resources to keep them together or put them with relatives, or to all these other things. So foster care should be much more rare than it is, but it's a money-making business. Adoption is a money-making business.
Yeah, absolutely. Why is it that most of our problems, the roadblock to the solution, is always federal funding?
It's a good question.
If we had the answer to that.
Right. Well, money talks apparently, and people, I don't understand selling out families for money. I don't understand how you can't put a price on keeping a family together, or not destroying a family, or providing tools that that provide for the next generation.
Would you say there's a level of indoctrination in the medical community where these people truly believe they're doing the right thing?
I think some of them are. I think they do. It's like not seeing the science right in front of them. Like, some of us kind of recognize that there was a certain shot that wasn't tested well and wasn't going to be necessarily a good thing, but the indoctrination was, this is going to fix it, this is going to fix it, this is going to fix it. And when we were saying, hey, wait, let's question this, let's look at this. I mean, science should be analytical. Science should analyze and test things and prove.
Absolutely. And then when you follow the money on the shot you were talking about, it all leads back to Big Pharma creating the propaganda, creating the false narratives to ensure that the profit margins continue to rise. And this being a medical issue, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he followed the money and probably wound up around the same conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so next I'd like to get into child trafficking. That seems to be a very big issue in the foster community, and I've heard a lot of problems about that, and I believe that you've spoke yourself and been very vocal about it. Mm-hmm. So could you explain to the viewers how child trafficking is playing a huge role within our foster care community?
Yeah. Well, there's a statement that I read in 2018, and I will never forget. I can't find it. It's like it disappeared from the DOJ website, but it was on the Department of Justice website, and they said that the largest supplier of children for the child sex trafficking industry in America is the foster care system.
That's crazy.
Isn't it insane?
Absolutely.
So we've got almost supply and demand. We've got an endless supply of children to all we have to do is take more children, and that they funnel it sometimes into the trafficking. So sometimes, like this man in Arizona, we know he was running that out of his home. There was a mainstream news in Los Angeles years ago had a thing where they had a list of licensed foster care providers and registered sex offenders. There were 1,000 names that were on both of those lists.
Oh my God.
So we've got to do better vetting.
Absolutely. I'm not even familiar with that situation. You said in Arizona, that's where that happened?
No, that was Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was in the mainstream newspapers of the area. So, yeah, it's crazy.
So how is immigration playing into all of this?
Well, that's a good question. Well, we know that their kids are coming across, or were especially coming across the border unaccompanied, and they would be funneled into the Health and Human Services. And RFK Jr. talked about how that was a nexus of trafficking. So many of those kids were being trafficked. They were being placed with parents or people that were not related to them. All kinds of things that they're uncovering there. So a lot of these kids would just disappear into the system and never be heard from again. So, wow. And I even bring that up in my book that I wrote, that if we as Americans, parents in America have a hard enough time fighting the system in family court. I mean, it's a real huge uphill battle. But imagine you've come here illegally. You're not even supposed to be here. How are you going to get the resources to fight that when your kid has been taken and trafficked? So that's another perspective that we're not really even looking at it from. It's like the destruction of the families there. It's like, it's a humanitarian issue.
And do they end up in the foster care system as well?
A lot of them do. Yeah, a lot of them do. Yeah.
So, wow. So I'd never put that together. So, I mean, you can almost say that immigration is sort of overwhelming our foster care systems and making it harder for everyone to keep up with the kids that are coming through and coming out. And I can see how that would complicate it even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big rabbit hole. There's a lot we have still to learn about what's going on. So with the trafficking, once the kids are in the system, whether they're American kids or the children of illegals, once they're in the system and they terminate parental rights, Senator Linda Collins Smith actually was talking to her good friend Kathy Hall, and I talk about it in my book. I wrote this book, Voices That Will Not Be Silenced. This is a true story of a baby that was taken by Child Protective Services that never should have been taken. Then the mother was killed by an illegal, so that makes the grandmother an angel mom. And there's a whole chapter on angel families in here about the impact of illegal immigration there. But the grandmother became good friends with Senator Linda Collins Smith in Arkansas. And during the last year of the senator's life, they were digging into judicial accountability, border security, and illegal immigration, and the foster care system. And she found hard evidence of the trafficking through the foster care system, through the courts, and she was about to expose it before she was murdered. Or she was murdered just a few days before she was scheduled to go on a show and expose it. Yeah. So we talk about all that in the book. But one of the things in it, the tagline at the back, nobody's looking for these kids. And she said that in 2019, the senator did to Kathy Hall, because once the parental rights are terminated, they've cut off all family communication with these kids. So whoever's adopted them, whether they're a wonderful Christian family that everybody loves and they're doing the right thing and their hearts are pure, or it's a pedophile who's adopting all kinds of kids to use for trafficking, you don't know, and the family has no contact with that child. They're cut off. They don't have the ability to track down, so they can lose these kids and they go missing. I mean, there's, tens of thousands of missing American kids, not to mention the ones at the border, but missing American children. And nobody knows. And if they've been adopted out to a trafficker, they're not going to tell them that that child's missing. There's no accountability. There's no follow-up.
If that's not the devil at work, I don't know what is.
Right, right.
Absolutely terrible. So, Terri, you are running for Congress, District 3.
Yes.
It's if what we talked about and this beginning of this whole podcast doesn't make you want to get involved, I do not know what does. But seems like you are doing just that in a very impactful way.
Thank you. I can't unsee the things that I've seen, and after I kind of backed off from writing for a while, and then I spent time and wrote the book. It was published last year, and then but I've been going to Washington, D.C. several times a year. I'm going soon this month again, and we talk to legislators, and we're talking to them, trying to educate them and let them know what's going on with Child Protective Services, trying to get them advocates, trying to change things for the kids that are in the system that are the foster care. It's a lot there. It's a much deeper rabbit hole than most people realize. But what I've seen, what I've learned from all of this is it's not just that. It's not just that. It's, the transgenderism of our children. Oh, fun fact, or not so fun. The early experiments on the kids to do the transgender surgeries, those were almost all done on foster kids.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Did you know that foster kids can legally be used for medical research and drug testing without their parents' knowledge or consent?
There's no way.
Yeah, there's loopholes because you think Nuremberg should have taken care of that, but there's loopholes because the judges or the social workers can give consent in lieu of the parents.
If these kids haven't already been through enough.
Right. So now they're a medical experiment, and I've seen way too much of that. Of them being experimented on and even killed in foster care because of that. But the transgenderism is related, because we found out that under the Biden administration, they were sending federal funds through Health and Human Services to have kids being adopted by gay, lesbian, the LGBTQ community, and they were pushing that and pushing all kinds of money into that agenda in the foster care system. And we know they've been pushing it in the libraries and all of these things that people don't realize how much of what we see in our everyday life in almost any arena is because federal funding provides the money to do it. And if we can have common sense federal funding, then we won't have some of these things shoved down our throat. We can return to basic good American values if we can have people with the integrity and the fortitude to stand up and do what's right. But what I see happening in Washington, D.C. is too many people go up there and they're going along to get along. And I know there's a place to do that, but appeasement a lot of times really is not the answer. We've got to have leadership that says, this is wrong. This is a line in the sand. You're not going to mess with our kids like this. And we're going to stand up and we're going to fight. And we're not going to stop. And if nobody else is willing to do it, I'm willing to do it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Terri, for your courage. This brings to mind Jared Hudson and Covenant Rescue.
Yeah.
That's a great foundation they have there and doing a lot of good things. Mm-hmm. And I see that he's not the only one. There's a lot around the U.S. that are doing the same thing. Would you say those are having an impact?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. Yeah. I went to hear him earlier this year, and one of the things I loved that they talked about was working with the district attorneys and making sure that not only are they rescuing the kids and going after the pedophiles and the traffickers, they are making sure that they do it in such a way that they build a case that will stick, that they can prosecute, so that they're not just, we caught them, but we don't have anything to hold them on. The case is flimsy. They're not doing that. They're making sure that they've got a solid case that can be prosecuted so they can actually put these guys away for good, which needs to happen.
That's great. And so it sounds like Mike Rogers is who you're running against. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any other candidates in the race that you're aware of?
Yeah, there's a young man, Drake Coakley.
Okay.
He's 23 years old, which I think is awesome that he's young and wanting to get involved in politics. I think that's amazing.
Okay,
So.
great. Well, I have yet to hear Mike Rogers mention anything that you've mentioned today. Mostly it's just funding Ukraine and getting into fistfights with Matt Guise on the floor. So it really is refreshing to see somebody like you running. And would you say that this was the biggest reason that you decided to run? Or are there other reasons behind it?
I feel like God has called me to do this, but yeah, the federal funding, I didn't see the initiative being taken in my district to fight these things and to stand up for these things. I know there are people in this district that have, and in Alabama, that have talked to his office and said, hey, can you fight for some legislation here? But that's really not his area, so he's not really standing up and fighting for that. And so the forgotten people need a voice. They need somebody to hear them. And they need somebody not only to hear them, but to actually go to bat for them and say, let's do something about this. Is wrong, and we need to address this. And, you know, I got a mouth and I know how to use it. And so I will talk to anybody and everybody and try to and work tirelessly to make changes. And I'm analytical. I'm a writer and a researcher. So I'm going to look at the bills. I will actually read the bills as much as humanly possible, and I've already got a plan in place for when it's not humanly possible for one person to do it. We'll have it parsed out where we are analyzing and digging through the bills and making sure that that if there's poison pills, we're dealing with those, we're addressing those, but also to take initiative when there are policies that are hurting Alabama families, American families. We've got to have somebody in Washington, D.C. that says, I don't care if it's not the popular thing. I don't care if it's not getting the funding. I don't care if if the media is not on board, but it's the right thing to do. And I'm going to stand up and I'm going to fight for the Alabama families the American families.
I love it. Thank you.
That's what I'm going to do. Because I've been doing it. That's what I've been doing. I've been doing it for a long time.
You're all over the place.
Yeah, you know the parental rights bill in Alabama that we passed in 2023 that says parents have the right to direct the care, upbringing, and education of their children?
Kenneth Pascal's.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
I remember that.
Well, that started back in 2015. I wrote the very first resolution in the state of Alabama in favor of that bill for the Republican women of Trustful.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
I had actually forgotten about it till Kenneth reminded me that I did that. But I'm no stranger to fighting for families, but I'm not a politician. I'm a mom. I was a homeschool mom and labor doula, childbirth, and I never dreamed I would be doing what I'm doing now. But like I said before, I can't unsee the things I've seen. And I'm not seeing somebody really taking the charge on these issues and really fighting for them. It's not that I'm saying, these other people are necessarily bad people. I'm not. I'm just saying you need to have the gumption to fight.
Oh, you have to have the courage.
Yes.
And you are absolutely full of the courage needed. I think that's obvious to anyone watching. When the Lord calls, you absolutely have to answer the call.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you've done, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah.
So Kenneth Pascal's bill, can you explain how that has changed anything as far as...
What it really did is lay a foundation and it was, his bill basically said what the Supreme Court has said over and over and over again and continues to say, like we saw that case recently about the parental rights with the library issue and the teaching things and parents being able to opt out of their kids being taught things with the LGBT that they didn't want taught. So the Supreme Court unanimously, or that's not the right word, the Supreme Court overwhelmingly reinforces parental rights, but in the family courts on the lower court level, it's not being championed. And so this law puts in place that foundation that says that parents have the right to direct the care and upbringing and education of their children. It just gives them another stronger leg to stand on when fighting for their kids. Before that, there are people in Alabama's legislature who believe and have stated publicly that the state is the ultimate authority over children. They believe that the state has power. Is supposed to be the ultimate authority over children, not the parents. So it's undermining parental rights.
Absolutely. I don't think our founding fathers intended it to ever be that way.
Right, right.
So if you're elected to Congress, do you have any specific plans, certain legislation that you plan on beginning to work on day one?
Absolutely. On day one, I'm going to refile a bill that was filed back in 2014-15 by Representative Michelle Bachmann. And it was Justina's law that said you can't use federal funding to use foster kids for medical research and experimentation. So that will be day one. And that went nowhere back then because nobody realized it was happening. And I think
How does something like that not even pass? I mean, surely.
Because I don't think they took it seriously.
Oh, wow.
And Justina's law, it's based off of the first story that I ever saw, Justina Pelletier out of Boston. That's the first story. That was the first time that term medical kidnapping had been used.
Or was there a lot of pork bellying that prevented the bill from being passed because they were trying to stop other things like we often see?
That could be too. That could be too. And, that we could possibly get that, maybe we could get it into some other things, maybe with child welfare, put it into any reauthorizations or whatever. But in one form or fashion, I want to get that done. Representative Barry Moore has had a bill a couple of times for a Advocates for Families Act. I think he was filed last year for the first time. That says that if you're dealing with Child Protective Services, that the state has to allow you to have an advocate. They don't have to pay for it. They don't have to provide it, but they have to allow you to have an advocate to help you navigate the process. I will sign on with that on day one. On day one, if the Born Alive Protection Act for those babies who have the audacity to survive an abortion, if that bill has not passed yet, I will sign on to that as a co-sponsor on day one.
So it sounds like border security actually plays a big role in making sure that we can protect our foster care system from child trafficking and making sure that it's not continuing to be overwhelmed. So how would you say there's some steps we can take to ensure that some of these executive orders that Trump passed are something that stays around for a long time and lasts for generations to come?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've got to make sure that we have leadership in Congress that is passing laws that codify these executive orders and make them into laws for the future generations. Because if we only have what he does for right now, the next president can come in, if they're of another persuasion, they can come in and just reverse it again with another executive order. So we've got to have these things stronger. Border security it's about the trafficking. Yes, and it's about protecting the children, keeping families from being separated at the border. Yes, absolutely. But it's also about protecting American citizens from crime. Violent crime is up so much in areas where there's a lot of the illegal immigration. We've got people coming from countries that hate us and that want to destroy us. If we don't keep the border secure, we're only going to have more angel families that are losing loved ones to violent, preventable crimes.
So it definitely looks like you have everything that people are looking for to be a great congresswoman. I would say anything that probably someone would question is military background, because Mike Rogers is, of course, military background. I believe he was a fireman too. Is that correct?
I think his father was a fireman.
His father was a fireman. Mm-hmm. So yes, I have to ask you, if you were to replace Mike Rogers and him being on the Armed Services Committee and tending to be a little more warmongerish, if you will, how would you be any different than him, and how would you represent that seat better than he will?
as far as the firefighter, I'm married to a firefighter.
Okay.
Yeah, he's working. He retired from the city of Birmingham and is still working as a firefighter and a volunteer. So I see the issues that affect the firefighters and law enforcement. There's a lot of great guys there. As far as our military, my goodness, I come from such a long line of veterans. My dad, my grandfather, my grandparents raised me. Granddad was retired from the military. He was in the military even in my early childhood. My father-in-law, my uncle, great uncles, couple of great uncles, brothers-in-law, several. I mean, I've got so many close relatives who served in the military in every branch, I believe, is covered. So I've seen the life, and I've seen what is important to veterans. And one of the things I actually was really disturbing to me for many years was seeing our veterans not even being taken care of in the VA hospitals and when they have medical needs. And in fact, I met somebody this weekend who was talking about how they lost his paperwork like twice, and he's fighting. He's trying to get disability, and he needs disability for an injury that happened in war, and he needs that help. How are we losing his information? Why? I don't even understand how that's happening. So I would absolutely fight for those guys. And one of the things that affects our military and veterans that I haven't seen really anybody in authority really addressing is the fact that, and it comes back to the families, that they are targeted, believe it or not, in family courts, in a divorce situation or custody situation, as well as with Child Protective Services.
Really?
Shocking, isn't it?
Wow.
Appalling, absolutely appalling. But I've literally seen cases where I remember this mother telling me about going to the Child Protective Services office where they were doing visitation, and she said it was all military people who had lost their kids. I'm like, explain that to me. Make that make sense. Make that make sense. But they seem to be easy pickings. They don't. A lot of times don't have the family in that community because they're stationed different places.
I see.
So I don't know if that's why they're an easy target or not. I don't know, but I want to find out. And one of the things that I've learned that is absolutely heartbreaking is military suicide. We hear about the veteran suicide rate, right? You know,
yes, we sure do.
Lots terrible. It's awful. One of the things I've learned is that many times it's connected to a family court battle. They've been fighting for custody of their kids since they came back from serving, or they are dealing with the custody issue or the child support issue or something like that. Did you know that a dad, if they lose their job or are struggling with child support, they arrest them, they put him in. They don't have a deadbeat dad jail where they go. They put him in with the rapists and the murderers. I didn't know that. But many of the suicides are connected to that fight. They give up. And they fought. They went overseas. They gave everything. They sacrificed everything. They laid it all on the line. They watched brothers and sisters and comrades in arms, go down in the fight and lose their lives. And they come back here and they find an even bigger fight of injustice in the courts for their kids. Explain that. That doesn't make any sense to me. We've got to change that. We've got to bring awareness to it first. We've got to make people aware, and there are things we can do. I'm certain of it, that we can, whether it's having a military, if you're somebody who you've served as a veteran and you are, maybe we need to provide funding for an advocate to help them to navigate the system, whatever. I did a case one time that never went to print, where a social worker went to the aunt of this dad who had lost his kids to the system. And the social worker said, well, tell me about his post-traumatic stress.
So and just assumed that he had
assumed it. She had it. And she looked at the social worker and she said, post-traumatic stress? She said, he served in Alaska. he doesn't have post-traumatic stress. They were fishing for something. And I have seen, and some of these guys do have post-traumatic stress, yes. And sometimes it's violent enough where they have to be kind of protected. You've got to have some kind of protection there for the family. And I understand that. I know that's a real thing. But sometimes we need to focus on helping them to process that and get through it. And sometimes it's not enough to take them out of the family. But we should not be targeting them and using their service for our country against them.
Absolutely.
That's disgusting.
And I've heard so many stories like this. I have a stepson, and he plays football. He's about to be 18 years old.
Oh, wow.
And he actually told me, he said, I want to be in the military. I want to be special ops. Now, being as patriotic as I am, I love my country. But I just couldn't help from hearing stories like this and friends that I grew up with that joined the military and looking at what they're going through now. I told them, don't do it. And I hate that I said that. It almost kind of made me feel like a hypocrite for a minute. I love my country. I want to protect my country. But at the same time, I'm sitting here telling my stepson, don't join the military. But hearing a lot of these stories just kind of helps confirm that there are good reasons, and it sounds like that there's a lot that needs to be fixed.
There is, but I think it's fixable. We're Americans. We're Americans. We are people that overcome. That's who we are as a nation, and I think as a nation we've forgotten that. We've become entitled or victim mentality. It's like, no, we need to remind ourselves that we're created in the image of God and we can overcome. There's nothing that has happened to us that we can't overcome. I myself had a rough upbringing. It was rough, and I shouldn't have amounted to anything, but God gave me the ability to overcome. And then Genesis 50:20, what the enemy meant for harm, God turns around and uses for good, for the saving of many lives, and that's the goal.
Of course, it's never good for someone to go through a rough upbringing, but I have no doubt that it helped turn you into the patriot and the courageous warrior that you are today.
I think it did. I think if it had been all easy, maybe, I don't think I would fight so hard for families. I feel like, not everybody is as lucky, is so lucky to have, parents that love them, mom and dad, and they get to visit their grandparents. Not everybody has that. But by golly, when they have parents that want them and love them, and it's the state that's trying to take them away and come in between that family, by golly, I'm fighting for those kids. I think sometimes it comes across like I'm fighting for the parents, I'm fighting for the parents, I'm fighting for the parents. I'm fighting for the kids. I'm fighting for our kids. Our kids have a right to know love and to be accepted, and that's what they want. Every kid wants the love and acceptance of their parents, their biological parents, when they can get it. And I understand that sometimes it's not possible. But let's fight for those kids and give them a better start at life and help them to be able to be good Americans that love God, that love our country, that love what is right, and stand up for what is right, and fight for and be a voice for the voiceless. Thank you.
So I want to ask you next.
Okay.
Mike Rogers, of course, he seemed to be a very big proponent of funding for Ukraine. Mm-hmm. How would you have handled that differently?
I probably wouldn't have called people stupid for not wanting to send more money to the Ukraine. I think there's plenty of good reasons not to send more money to the Ukraine. We've been sending money over there and sending money over there and sending money over there. It's like, okay, why are we sending money? We have to stop and say, okay, this is American taxpayers who are working hard. Why are we sending this money over there? And I think some has come out about the human trafficking in the Ukraine, and there's a lot of money laundering that's going. There's a lot of politicians whose family members are getting rich in Ukrainian businesses. That makes no sense to me. So I just want to know what's the real story there. My investigative journalist brain wants to, I don't have access to some of those sources, but I want to find out a lot of what's going on there. I don't think we should be giving them nearly the amount of money that we've been giving them. And I think, like bringing President Trump to the table, even when we had Biden as a president who was, bless his heart, that's just all I'm going to say. We should have been doing more negotiating and more trying to find a peaceful solution over there. Try peace when you can. Sometimes I understand, sometimes you can't. We're watching a master with India and Pakistan negotiating that they want to give him a Nobel Peace Prize for what he did over there. He is one to be able to use strength wisely. And we have to be in a position of strength. Our military has to have the tools to fight and to win decisively. But to just have mamby-pamby tools to keep on going over there and just, he hit me and I'm a mom. This sounds like a bunch of toddlers. Mom, he hit me. Oh, he hit me back. Oh, he hit me. Put an end to it. Be the grown-up in the room and say, let's stop this. Okay?
Couldn't agree more.
And Trump is the grown-up in the room, and some people don't like it, but I mean, with that situation with Iran and the nukes, Trump was the grown-up in the room who said, okay, you're not going to do this. You're not going to have nuclear weapons. And he put a stop to it. It was surgical. It wasn't long protracted and saying, well, if you do this, then I'm going to do this, and you better not do that, or I'm going to do this. And it was, I told you, and these are the consequences. Bam. And
Just
he did it.
Simple as that. Yeah, sure was.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a lot of division, too, on this big, beautiful bill. If you were currently in Congress, where would you stand on it?
I am glad that the big, beautiful bill passed. There are things that are problems. There are. And there are things that, when you've got a huge, massive bill, you've got to stand up and you've got to fight for what is right. And then at some point, you've got to know when to, okay, I can die on this hill, or I can go on and agree to this whole package, and I've got most of what I want here. Do you know what? I'm going to go back and fight on this another day. I'm going to live to fight another day on this. And I'm not giving up on what I want, but I'm going to go on and pass this, and let's get most of what I want done. And then, it's negotiation. It's get as much as you can and fight as hard as you can for it. But at some point, you get it passed, and then you go back, and those things that you didn't win, those battles that you didn't win, you keep fighting. You don't give up. You can't give up on doing what's right. You've got to keep fighting.
Could not agree more. So me being a big supporter of the Second Amendment, I have to ask you something that it upset me. It upset a lot of people in the gun community. It looks like it may have been added back. I'm not sure, but it looks like the Hearing Protection Act involving suppressors and the SHORT Act, short barrel rifles, was in the big beautiful bill, and it was going to remove those items from the NFA. So making it to where, of course, we didn't have to pay the $200 extra tax stamp and wait to get approved and fingerprints and all those things. So if you were in Congress right now, what would be your take on that being removed from the bill? Is that something you would want back in there, or would you agree that it shouldn't?
I would definitely prefer that it be put back in there because, the Second Amendment is like, shall not be infringed. What part of that is vague? What part of that is confusing? Why do we have all these restrictions that this little nitpicky thing makes you a felon, and this one, it's like, it's ridiculous in the first place. Now,
Yes.
if that's the thing that's holding it back, can we, maybe in the midterms, hopefully we'll pick up some more Republican seats, some conservative, and maybe we'll get some real conservatives replaced. I don't know. But you've got to work with what you've got, but keep on fighting for it. Don't give up on fighting for what should be our not what should be our constitutional right. It's what is our constitutional right. Some of these laws they've had in place don't sound like they would pass the constitutionality test. And maybe they should be
Absolutely.
put to the test. Maybe that's where that's fought. You know, I'm not a big fan of judicial, of judges making law. I'm not a fan of that at all. But sometimes the courts do come in play when they clarify. They should clarify. Yeah, this is constitutional or not constitutional. Maybe that's what we need.
Well, Terry, this was absolutely one of my favorite podcasts so far.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
In Alabama, being the rhino capital of the world that we are, it is refreshing to see a true conservative that's willing to step up and run for Congress. And if I was in District 3, you would absolutely have my vote.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So where can people go to check you out and support you? Maybe donate to your campaign? Or
That would be great. This is a grassroots campaign. So I've got a website, TerriLaPointForCongress.com. And Terri is with an I, and there's no E on LaPoint. Terri LaPoint for Congress. You can find me on Facebook. Same Terri LaPoint for Congress Facebook page. I'm on X. And should be expanding more. But if you go just to my website, there's a donate tab there. And also, you know, if you want to get some friends together and do a meet and greet, contact me. There's a contact place, and you can contact me and email me. My name, Terri LaPoint, at protonmail.com. And let's work together. Let's fight for our families. God, families, freedom, that's the point. You know,
Absolutely.
That's what it's all about. And I truly believe that we're going to turn things around. Because we see everything that President Trump is doing, and I think we are turning things around. If you want to get my book, it's on Amazon. It's also I've got a website, realnewsspark.com, and there's a listing there where you can get the book there, and you can see very much my heart through this book. It's one family's story. I was told, as far as readability, somebody told me that it reads like a John Grisham novel, except it's all true.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet. I'm absolutely going to do that now.
And one good thing, can I share this?
Sure.
Yeah, there's a couple of judges in there that you see are not doing their job, and and you really don't like them in this book. One of them has retired now, and all of a sudden put in her resignation after 34 years on the bench, and her term doesn't end till the end of 2026. And I was told that it's kind of directly related to the book, that she decided that she needed to step down.
Oh, wow.
So, and when she put in her resignation, she stepped down the very next day. So I see that as a win. She's not destroying families anymore. She belongs in prison, but that's, at least she's not destroying families anymore. But the thing is, the things that we talk about in this book are happening all over America. And people need to realize and see why we're fighting.
Well, Terri, thank you so much for accepting this invite and coming on the
Absolutely.
podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for standing strong, and you have my support 100%.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.